Welcome to Democracy in the News. Stories, or I'm going to be talking about some phone banking I did on behalf of the Democratic Socialists of America, senatorial support for the PRO Act. Also, there's a new challenge to Roe v. Wade that's going to be support during the next session in October. We'll talk a bit about that. Those are the big stories, but also have a few small ones. House regarding the January 6th commission, or the commission, a special commission on 6th being set up by legislation. Some breaking news today that's been agreed to by both Hamas as well as the Israel's government. I have on the mask mandate and how it affects me here in California. And I have a fun story, which I call Republicans in real time. It's not really real time. It's more like right in front of our faces. So that being said, let me go into my, what do you call these things? My initial, not statements, but I always start out with these things at the beginning of every stream. My preamble, I don't know. Okay. So rewatch disclaimer, although this is going to be a bit different than before, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it, which is if you're watching this replay on YouTube, hopefully it has chapters now. Click to the section that interests you. I structured it differently this time, so I'm gonna do a bunch of small stories first, and then I'm stories towards the end, hopefully building a little bit of an audience that's still there to listen to the second part of it. And if you're on Facebook, there's not gonna be any chapters. The best you can do, try to keep track of what story is currently going. And then, but if you can, go to YouTube, subscribe and all that good stuff if you use YouTube. All right. Now for channel updates, this relates to what I just talked about. Trying to hit the microphone. So I'm gonna try something different this week, which is I'm gonna do the stream, and I have these two main stories that I think are interesting enough that they might be able to get some search volume on YouTube. I'm gonna pull the stream, extract the stream from YouTube, and then re-upload it and edit it in YouTube. For the two major stories. And so I may do a third one that's just a summary, but I may just leave the stream up and just focus on the small stories for the metadata. But the point is, that's what I'm going to probably be doing. Try that this week, see if that works a bit better, and release the videos on different days. Algorithm likes semi-daily uploads, so that might help too. So I'm just going to do a little bit of that. We'll see how that goes. Still, as I'm continuing to focus on my weekly streams, Democracy in the News, and as well as I have some projects in May. Once those are over, I'll probably be doing some policy streams. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And those will probably be on the PRO Act and on HR 1, the For the People Act, when I finally do those. All right. Now, as you know, I've worked with Move to Amend and some of their senior leadership, including Caitlin, who is kind of in charge, the person most senior in the organization, started a new podcast. He just started. I think they have one episode out at this point. And it's called Agitated, the Agitated Podcast. And they're not doing it as Move to Amend. They're doing it under the banner of Democracy Unlimited, which is kind of affiliated with Move to Amend. But it's not. They're not speaking as Move to Amend. They're speaking generally as female progressives about the issues of the day. Kind of here, but in a podcast format. And so they asked me to mention them, and so I wanted to do so, and I'll probably do so several weeks. But I wanted to do that so I can share my screen. I can actually show a picture of their YouTube. Let me see, where is it? There it is. There's that. That's my outline right there. Let me minimize that. And that's later on. I'm talk about that. So Agitators, this is their podcast. You can go to podcast.com, just Agitated and podcast, all one word. .com, and they're on Spotify, Stitcher, Breaker, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Castbox, and it looks like they have. Let me see. It looks like they just have 2 right now. They've got their upload episode. They got episode 2, I think. They got 2 episodes. Looks like so far. So anyway, check them out. All right, let me come back. Boom. And then I'm going to also bring back up my, what do you call this thing? I'm bringing back up my PowerPoint here, my outline. So I remember what I'm doing. So the first thing I want news about the Middle East ceasefire. That just can't happen today. I was glad to hear it. It's needless death. It's not accomplishing anything besides destroying buildings and costing human lives. From what I read so far, it looks like Egypt was a primary broker in dealing with both Hamas as well as Israel, although the United States, among others, pressuring Israel. Now, the article I read, which I believe was on CNN, said that because the United States considers Hamas a terrorist organization, we don't engage formally with them. So intermediaries to negotiate with them, which seems odd to me. Even if you don't count, it's like it seemed like you would still be able to reach them if you needed to without having to go through other countries. That seems a bit odd, but that's the way those politics apparently work. And so we went through Egypt and negotiate this. Now, one thing that Biden came out and made some haphazard speech a few hours ago, and he kind of both sides the issue. He said both that they would, quote unquote, replenish the Iron Dome, which I guess they're fired up to intercept the missiles that were being fired towards Israel, or something needs to be replenished and working that protects Israel from rocket and ballistic attacks from other occupied territories. But then also that the United States would be helping to rebuild Gaza, which is very important because saying that Israel didn't really want to stop doing this because demolishing the infrastructure of the occupied territories and helping Palestinians out of there is kind of part of their agenda. So they didn't particularly want to stop doing that. And there was the building, the press building was destroyed, schools, hospitals, and all under, of course, the guise of Hamas has there. Although a lot of those claims seem to be very questionable. It's like a catch-all for everything Israel does is because of Hamas is hiding something there. So it's a little suspicious. So I'm glad to hear that Biden, at least both sides, he at least said, hey, we're going to help out Israel and we're going to help rebuild Gaza. So that's good. There was a UN resolution that was going to be calling for a ceasefire, but the United States actually held it up. And the reports that are coming out was that Biden behind was being a little more hard on Netanyahu than he was publicly. Because publicly he was kind of saying, I'm talking to him, but they were, as this ceasefire in the UN, the US was holding it up. So it seemed like there was a lot of criticism of the Biden administration for playing with kid gloves. And so it was good that it seemed that maybe in the background, again, this might just be spin and it may just always played nice. Who knows? A lot of this stuff is kind of controlled leaks of kind of agitprop for the government. So we'll see. We may never know the truth about it, but at least there is a regardless. And if the U.S. does come through with their claims that they'll help rebuild in Gaza as well, that's important because, there was a lot of damage. Israel's attacks were very damaging, and there's no Iron Dome over the occupied territory. So everything that's fired hits something. So one last thing I want, hopefully this will become an old story pretty soon, at least in terms of the active violence, which is, I was proud to see that that progressive Democrats, because generally it's been pretty bipartisan, the support of Israel and their kind of uncriticized right to defend themselves. So it was actually good to see some progressive Democrats, especially ones that weren't themselves, Arab or Muslim, which kind of builds in some degree of protection from critique, or rather they're going to get critiqued, what they say. So people like Cori Bush, AOC, that stepped up and were willing to, criticize Hamas, but that's, everybody does that, but also Israel, because, it takes two to tango. This is a conflict that both sides were involved in, both sides to some degree instigated. There's, of course, the power disparity I talked about last week, but the point is, if you only critique one side and not the other, you're basically pointing blame at that side. And so it was nice to hear there were voices that there was critique on both sides so that Americans would get both, be able to make their own decisions as far as, what they thought should or shouldn't be happening. But in the past, that hasn't always happened. It's been, Israel good guys, Hamas and the Palestinians, some of them at least, bad guys, and whatever Israel does is okay. And that's not critical, and nobody's above, facing criticism. Israel. All right. Now, I talked a bit about how the CDC came down with the mask, the new, not mandate, but the new guidelines saying that you didn't really need to wear a mask indoors if you were fully vaccinated. And so that confused people. And what am I supposed to do about it now? So I just want to give you a little personal anecdote about that. So, I didn't hear anything organically, like, just I'm in California. And I didn't hear anything organically about what I was supposed to now do differently. So I wanted to kind of say that, nothing came across, nothing obvious, nothing came in the mail, no emails, no text messages, nothing that just told me to do anything different. Then I said, well, you know what, today, let me go and actually search and see if I can find out if there was some change to California policy that I just was ignorant of. So I did that, and there wasn't. There's no policy change so far. California legislators seem to be looking into it, and something may change by sometime in June. But as of right now, the policy is the same as it was 2 weeks ago, which is if you're outdoors, you don't have to wear a mask. If you're indoors, you do. And any change to that is still forthcoming. Excuse me. All right. Okay. Now, this is a funny story. I wanted to actually pull that up, and I don't think I have a screenshot, but I wanted to kind of pull that up a little bit. It's a picture. If you saw the screenshot that I put up there, is the picture in the lower right-hand corner. Let me see if I can bring it up. Boom. Okay, that's my outline again. This has to do with the Congresswoman Elise Stefanik from New York, Republican from New York. And I'm going to go ahead, agitated. I'm just going to see if I can pull her, at least her face up so you can see what I'm talking about. Elise Stefanik. Boom. There you go. That's her. That is Elise Stefanik. She is a Republican elected in 2014, took office in 2015 in the House of Representatives as a Republican from the state of New York. Now, I'm going to go back to my outline because I do not have the story memorized. Hold on. Anyway, that's what she looks like. So I'll go back to me. See, I'll just stare at my outline. Okay. So she was someone that was elected in 2014 to take office in 2015. And she was once a self-described moderate who actually voted against the 2017 Republican tax cut that mostly favored the rich. She sold herself as a bipartisan consensus searcher. She's trying to find consensus and work with Democrats and be in that centrist middle where everybody, all the reasonable people are, the quote unquote reasonable people are. That was her brand, as it were. So, and as I said, as part of that brand, she voted against the 2017 Republican tax cuts. However, something changed over the past 3 years. And she actually voted, this is after, so remember on January 6th, they were having votes. And so they would vote to the collected Congress would vote to accept the electors that the state had sent to them based on their votes and which party had come out ahead, whatever the rules of that particular state were, which do vary a little bit. States can choose their electors how they want to. But Congress either choose to accept those electors, or if at least one member of the House and one member of the Senate both bring an objection, the House and the Senate separate and separately vote on that objection. And if both sustain, then it actually leads to the electors being thrown out, and the delegation representing all the members of the House for that state get to decide where those electoral votes go to. That's how the rules work. So it's important to understand that before. So during January 6th, what happened is for the state of Pennsylvania, among I think Arizona too, but after that whole riot and whatever you want to call it happened, and an incursion into the Capitol happened, they reconvened and finished the process. And one of the states that was after that occurred was Pennsylvania. Objections were raised by the House and the Senate, Republicans both. they separated, and in the House, in the Senate, I believe it was 9 Republican senators actually voted to throw votes and basically throw out all the votes of Pennsylvania voters. In the House, 139 House Republicans throw out the electors from the state of Pennsylvania. And Elise Stefanik was one of those 139 House members. So she went from somebody who on tax cuts to someone who told the Trumpist great lie about, totally unsubstantiated by any, that Pennsylvania's votes should not be counted, and that the delegation, the House delegation for Pennsylvania instead of the people of Pennsylvania. And the reason why this is because, Liz Cheney this past week got thrown out from leading number 3 position in the House. Like McCarthy, then maybe Scalise or somebody. Then it was Liz Cheney, the daughter of Dick Cheney. She got kicked out of leadership because she has correctly been pointing out how ridiculous the idea of Trump actually won the election is, considering how he lost by 7 million votes and the Electoral College wasn't close either. So it's a ridiculous, baseless conspiracy theory that she wouldn't has too much whatever to go along with such things. Pride, ego, a self-dignity. I respect, I don't know what to call it, but she got too much of something. She won't go along with it like those 139 House members and 9 senators. So she got kicked out of the House and they had to elect her replacement. Now, there was a guy who had voted for the 2017 tax cut that was up for that. And then there was also, who I think is also senior. I think he was older. I think more of a senior member. Not sure about that though. And then there was Elise. And Elise was the one that won. And so now this person who is a four-term House member is number 3 in leadership in the House. To put that in perspective, I think McCarthy is 7-term or 8-term, something like that. And there are people that have been there 20, 30 years. So it's not super right in the middle of a pack in terms of junior versus senior in the House. And so she's there. And what we saw was she paid the price to get into leadership. She was that centrist, that moderate, that I may vote for, I may vote against. And this is going to come up in a minute. The Republican centrists, the few that there are, that are actually willing to not toe the line. And she was one of those. And now she isn't. Now she's totally on board. She's part of leadership. And all it took was, undermining the very of American people voting for the president to do it. And so you get to see, we kind of look at Congress and think, what happens? And these people don't go there to be corrupt, to sell out, or to calm the people they often point at and say those people are bad, but yet somehow they get transformed years and years. I mean, Nancy Pelosi 25 years ago was for Medicare for all. And she's out there on YouTube or her touting the value of it and how important it was, and and the morals of it, et cetera, et cetera. And now, she laughs in your face. You ask her about Medicare for all to Congress people. And so I just want to give an example here of someone who sees an opportunity. They see the way the winds are blowing. They see Trump's popular in my district. This is where leadership is going, and they're rewarded with power. And someone who is a traditional Republican who kind of votes the right way, but doesn't go along with the most of it, and voting to throw out electors with no real due cause, not just objecting, but actually going through with voting out the votes of tens of millions. I think it's tens of millions of Pennsylvania voters, at least around 10 million, throw them out based on a ridiculous, conspiracy theory pretty far. And she was willing to do it, and she was rewarded for it. So I thought that was an important story to me in terms of where we're at with democracy here in the United States, at least with one party's leadership. All right. So I clicked on the same thing here. All right. So here's the big first story of the day. United States of America is going to see its first case regarding abortion and Roe versus Wade, the first major case, although I think really the first case, right, where there's going to be oral arguments and such. since Amy Coney Barrett became a member of the Supreme Court, replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and it became a 6-3 conservative court. That case is from Mississippi. It's called Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. Now, just a real quick about Amy Coney Barrett. She kept, as all justices do, she kept her legal opinions close to her vest. She did say that she's a conservative Catholic, or she's Catholic, which the way she talks about it is in a conservative fashion. And she is personally, like her personal opinions is she is against all abortion. I did a separate video about her that if I make this a separate video, I'll link to or what have you. I have a video about her, but about criminal justice, which I think is very well done. I'm very proud of it. And then I also have a video that's about abortion in the Supreme Court and kind of what I think. This is about a few months ago. This is before this particular case. There's several cases coming down the pipe about abortion. This is the case the court chose to pick up. Now, the court specifically said in this case that what they're going to do is they're going to look at whether or not. So the Mississippi law is what it does is it's a procedural ban on abortion after 15 weeks, which is clearly before fetal viability, basically where the fetus could be taken out of the woman and survive. Okay. So the court decided they're going to look at one question regarding this case, whether all bans of abortion before viability are unconstitutional. Now, this goes to the heart of Roe versus Wade. So just to give you a quick synopsis of Roe v. Wade, the basic idea is, based on the 14th Amendment, a woman has a right of control of her own person. And because it's called kind of the right to privacy was referred to, but that's kind of weird because it almost seems like you're talking about people spying on you, but it really means the right to control your own person. And so Roe v. Wade is like, well, that fetus is part of the woman's body. And so she has to maintain control of her own body. And really what this question comes to is whether or not before that fetus is viable, and at that point, it's not its own person, it's connected through any kind of rational, scientific sense, it's part of the woman's body, whether or not the woman has full control over her body. And if she doesn't, if the court rules that that answers this question and overrules this, and says that the viability line that's currently been drawn based on kind of precedent since Roe v. Wade, but kind of the essence of Roe v. Wade would really be challenged. It may not be a full overturning of Roe v. Wade, but it would be a major paradigm shift in how we look at and how the court looks at abortion cases. So this decision is going to be, I think, now I'll come with a couple different scenarios that could happen, but let me just give you the logistics of this, which is that the arguments will be in the fall and the decision would probably come 6 odd months after that. So you're looking at, sometime in 2022, maybe even the summer before the midterms. So that could be very interesting. And one thing I thought when I made my last video was that the court was maybe trying to this is a very divisive issue. It's one where the court knows public opinion is against, quote unquote, overturning Roe. So I have a feeling that, and this is going and prognosticating a little bit, I have a feeling that they're not going to do something that would be automatically construed as overturning Roe. However, they may overturn some precedent relating to Roe v. Wade since then that established that ban of abortion before viability is unconstitutional, which isn't Roe. That's a separate case. I don't remember the name of. I didn't find for my notes. That's a case since then actually established that specific litmus test. But if you challenge that, then you get into a space where it's not clear what rights really are protected, because you already had 5 votes. And our other video goes more into this. You already had 5 votes that would have allowed other types of curtailing of abortion clinics. Like it was like the indirect means of closing down abortion clinics by passing onerous requirements of the clinics, like super wide hallways, or having I think that one was related to having admittance privileges at a hospital, which hospitals aren't forced to give anybody. But if your doctors don't have it, they can close your clinic. Stuff like that. You already have 5 votes for that. And Roberts, that was when Ruth Bader Ginsburg was still there. And Roberts voted against that because even though he voted for it the first time, he was doing so to try to, they think he was trying to respect, he said he was trying to respect precedent. And also the issue, because it was a different case, there was he was able to weave his way through that one a little bit. But this time, Roberts' vote doesn't even matter. If Amy Coney Barrett votes differently or feels differently about this decision, about that, then that's 5 votes right there for that. And this goes to the heart of Roe. And I do think that there's a good chance that there's essentially a full overturn. But what I suspect is they won't overturn Roe. What they'll do is they'll overturn some precedent since then that makes Roe almost irrelevant, and essentially guts it the way the conservative court gutted the Voter Rights Act of 1965 back in the mid-aughts, when they cut out some of the enforcement aspects of it related to the Justice Department. So the law is still there, but you can get around it pretty easily, and that may be the case for what they do here. There also was another scenario I read about where what they would do is they would give the state of Mississippi the win on this case, but do so in such a limited way that it would signal that the court is favorable to laws that curtail abortion in abortion clinics, but it won't actually create the headline of Roe being overturned. Essentially play politics with the decision in a very distinct way. But the question is, do they have enough savvy members to even try to do that? Roberts might try to do that, but Barrett, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, it's not clear that they would think and worry about the politics of it that much. And I don't, Alito and Thomas don't care. They're guaranteed votes to favor Dobbs in this case. I guess Dobbs I think Dobbs went to the Attorney General of Mississippi, but Dobbs represents Mississippi to favor Mississippi. So that's what's likely to happen there. Now, one other thing I wanted to go into is a scenario of what if Roe was overturned. And I may make this a separate video too. We'll see. But what if Roe was overturned? What would the United States look like in terms of abortion rights? So for that, I'm going to pull up my screen again. Boom. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to go, look at that smiling face. I'm going to go to what if Roe fell. This is from the maps.reproductiverights.org, the organization Center for Reproductive Rights, and obviously a pro-choice, pro-abortion rights organization. And so they created this lovely map here that shows kind of the state of abortion rights in various states. This color here, this nice teal color, is actually the color that's like affirmative, like they're above and beyond Roe, and that even if Roe goes away, there's essentially no consequence. So you have state of Washington, you got state law protects personal reproductive decisions. Oregon, same thing. California, the California's High Court recognized abortion rights under the California Constitution in 1969, 4 years before Roe. So that doesn't even matter there. New York State, New York passed comprehensive abortion rights legislation, although that's only legislation, so that could theoretically change, but not likely in New York. Vermont is also 2019, Vermont enacted comprehensive abortion rights. Connecticut state law protects abortion, and Connecticut's enacted additional laws to expand abortion access. See there, and that's also part of New York. So there was those. Yellow is essentially protected. It's a kind of an even amount. It's not quite as strong as the teal, but it's still pretty solid. You have Nevada, Alaska, Montana, Minnesota. Minnesota's the high court. Sometimes it's legislative, sometimes it's the court that does it. It varies from place to place. Illinois, you have comprehensive legislation. Kansas, high court ruled that this is surprising. Kansas is kind of surprising, but their high court ruled that pregnant person's right to personal autonomy, and that's kind of a good description of what Roe is protected by the state constitution. Florida, high court recognized the right to abortion under the Florida Constitution. I don't know if you knew, but every state has its own constitution too. So you have sometimes a state constitutional rights that aren't necessarily federal rights, or sometimes there's a lot of overlap. Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, that's legislative, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland. Then you get to the reds. Now the light reds are ones where it's at risk, but there's no explicit things enacted, laws or what have you, or rulings enacted specifically that restrict women's abortion rights. So it could go either way. And you have Wyoming, no current laws. Colorado has enacted, so Colorado's almost like a red between the two reds, because they enacted a few restrictions, but the law does not expressly protect abortion, and the courts haven't spoke on it. So they're right in the mix there. New Mexico, the courts have not determined it. New Mexico has a pre-Roe ban on abortion that could reduce access in theory. So again, these light reds are not really good. They're just not terrible. New Hampshire, that's an interesting one. Now, New Hampshire repealed a pre-Roe ban on abortion, but has enacted some restrictions. But state law doesn't explicitly protect it. So that's an interesting mix there. And then Virginia, in 2020, just in 2020, repealed numerous medically unnecessary restrictions on abortion access. Okay, so, what's this? Oh, Puerto Rico. Okay, so Puerto Rico, actually, I think it's funny, you can't tell because it's by itself out there, but that looks light red, but that's almost dark red because it seems to be saying that Puerto Rico does prohibit abortion except when therapeutic or to protect health or life. And the rest of these are dark red, meaning that they have stuff going on that's bad. Also, any questions or comments you want to speak on, go ahead and please post and I'll respond. I have one more story, the other headline story after this, and I'm done. So if you have anything you want to post, just let me know. All right. So the rest of the states that have some degree of restrictions. Idaho has something called a trigger ban, which means if Roe is overturned, then if the law changes, then the ban goes into effect, but it doesn't unless that happens. Some states will go ahead and pass it, and they want to actively challenge and send to the Supreme Court. Other ones, just do trigger bans, which mean, hey, we want to do it, but we respect the court. So until the court changes, we're going to respect what the court's decision is. So Idaho is calling it a trigger ban. They don't explain it here, but that's my understanding what a trigger ban is. Nevada, Utah enacted a trigger ban too. And also have other restrictions already. Arizona has an unenforced pre-Roe ban, and medically unnecessary restriction makes it difficult. So they're already in bad shape. Medically unnecessary restriction makes it difficult. Okay, got medically unnecessary. Oklahoma has 2 pre-Roe bans that abortion, if enforced, that they got medically unnecessary restriction. Nebraska, numerous medically unnecessary restrictions. Things like the width of the hallway or admission access, all those things that are probably not those specific ones which were overturned, supported by the Supreme Court, but there are other ones. There are all kind of different ways to kind of skin that cat as far as prohibiting abortion. So they're trying different things there. So it's different ways of basically going after the clinics, to make it difficult for them to actually run without explicitly saying abortion is not legal. What I refer to when I talk about the medically unnecessary bans. There's a reason that they're providing for the rule that's medically unnecessary. It's just an excuse to ban abortion around. Anyway, North Dakota, trigger ban. Wisconsin, the current governor is supportive of abortion rights, but state law does not explicitly protect it. And they've got some new medically unnecessary restrictions as well. Current governor is supportive of abortion rights, but numerous restrictions make it difficult to access within the state. And they've got a pre-Roe ban, and the courts have not spoke on it. I'm just going to go through the rest of these. Indiana had some restrictions. Ohio enacted the 6-week ban that actually I think is in court right now. Pennsylvania, that one probably should be light red. There's nothing explicit there. The governor is supportive of abortion rights, but there are medically unnecessary restrictions, and there's a pre-Roe ban. Numerous medically unnecessary restrictions. Georgia, 6-week ban. That was when I talked about in that previous video. They've got a 6-week ban you got to worry about. Let me see. Am I okay? Okay, my internet's okay. Okay, cool. Thought my internet had gone out. All right. Mississippi, and that's probably in the courts, probably. Georgia's got that quick ban that's in the courts. Tennessee's got a trigger ban. Kentucky's got a trigger. Arkansas's got a trigger ban. Louisiana's got a trigger ban. And Missouri's got a trigger ban. So yeah, so over half the states in the country would immediately lose access to abortion. If any really wide breadth decision was, as I said, there could be a very constrictive decision that wouldn't necessarily do anything, but any kind of decision that really strong, that even if it's not a full repeal of Roe, would probably open up these states to pass restriction bans if they haven't already. Because some of those trigger ones may not trigger without a full overturn, but this would basically give them the ability to at least pass the 15-week one, or Georgia's got a 6-week one that would then be legislated, but they could actually pass it and then wait for the. So that's the thing, once the court says yes to a pre-viability case, the other pre-viability cases suddenly have side, and the court has to go the other direction in order to make them unconstitutional again. So it essentially kind of turns the burden of proof or the burden of decision on its head. So keep that in mind. So that's about all I wanted to say on that particular. Go on to the last main story now. So I'm gonna pop it back onto me like that. All right. Let's see here. So, all right. Okay. So a few days ago, I was contacted via text message, Democratic Socialists of America, who I'm on their mailing list. As I said, I actually got on their mailing list from helping out my friend Daniel Lee try to run for office and doing phone banking with them on Daniel's behalf in order to run for state senate. And so I stay on their mailing list because I do pragmatic a lot of their policy positions, even though I'm a registered Democrat and I tend to vote for them. My actually policy positions are actually more aligned with the DSA than they are with, say, the center. So I stay on their list. The other thing is the Democratic Party, because they're the institutions that surround it, like the local, the LA chapter or the California chapter, they're not going to generally hold their politicians. They'll generally go to them in a nice way and say, would you please support this? We vote, this is the way we vote. We would hope that you would do so. Kind of ask nicely. Organizations like the DSA or the People's Party, although I haven't heard anything from them about this issue or calling the Senate about phone banking for anybody. But those are hold feet to the fire, which I think is valid and important for organizations to do to elected politicians, because I think we're far too nice to them. And I've said this about criticisms of the squad, how reasonable they all are. But I think it's fair to have, and I think it's healthy for us to look to our politicians and expect more than us and to ask for more, because you only get what you ask for. Excuse me. So anyway, say, hey, would you sign up for this phone bank? We want to do phone banking for the PRO Act. Now, the PRO Act is a pro-union type legislation. Basically, make it easier for people to join unions again and make it easier for unions to maintain themselves. Several laws, work laws, have made it hard for unions financially in organizational fashion. They're basically trying to suppress and push down the power, because unions are the best way for workers to organize collectively. And so by the downturn in union access and union membership over the last 40 years coincided with a decrease in the amount of power that workers have in our government. Our government, more than it is beholden to rich and corporations. And that's in part because of the weakness of union power nowadays. And that's not necessarily all unions aren't always great. I have big issues with a lot of what police unions do, for instance, and how they seem to protect the current state of policing, even if it's not even in their own members of the police department's best interest. And unions are they can enshrine the status quo in a way that is necessarily the best for whatever entity or organization they're connected to, or business or what have you. They can stifle innovation in a sense, be it governmental innovation or commercial innovation. But on the other hand, it's important for workers to have a voice in our society, and unions have tended to be the most effective, or been one of the most effective ways, probably for workers to have a voice in the government as a collective, the collective voice for the rights of workers and for the benefit of all workers. And so, as I knew about the PRO Act already, I said, you know what, I'll make some calls. And what they wanted to do in this particular case is they want to call constituents in certain states. In this case, it was Arizona, but it can be different states. They already done this in West Virginia and working on Manchin, who has now come out in favor of the PRO Act, according to them, as well as Angus King, who is actually independent because he's right in the middle. and it got him to be in favor of it as well, because it's very reasonable, because a lot of what the PRO Act is a restoration of what unions used to be, parents' generation, when they were a meaningful force in politics and were able actually to help protect, the right in government. And so even a lot of older conservatives like Angus King probably recognize its value, even if they're not guys and the people in the world. So I said, okay, sure. So I signed up for it. I don't like calling people. It's not something I enjoy particularly. It was okay, I'm gonna do this because I think it's important. And you can't let the cynicism about make you tune out. It's important to always stay involved, to keep on trying, because when you tune out, it just gives people that are currently in power. And your apathy is their strength. And so things like this, making phone calls, getting people in those states involved is very important. I just did it for about an hour yesterday, and it's like, you only do a little bit. It's tough for me. It's exhausting for me, talking on the phone with people, making a new connection. I'm kind of an introvert, so it's not easy. But I'm pushing through walls, and I'm trying to get better at it too. It's easier than it used to be for me. So I'm trying to push through walls. Actually reached out to me again and wanted me to do it again. So I think they've got some hours tomorrow. So I may call in and do an hour or two tomorrow. So let me talk to you a little bit about, keep on doing that. Let me talk to you a little bit about how it works. So in this particular case, what they're doing is they're asking us, the way this particular phone bank worked is they were asking, because Arizona senators, Democrats, Mark Kelly and Kirsten Sinema, everybody's favorite senator now, after her thumbs down vote on the minimum wage, they're both not currently supporters of the PRO Act. And recently I saw an article about how Mark Kelly has a potential conflict of interest because of some business he's involved in, and I think maybe involves workers that are designated a certain way, or he may have some conflict of interest, because Mark Kelly tends to be pretty good. And actually, one of the people I talked to on the phone was like, they were surprised. I said, no, they officially haven't, but we're more hopeful for him. So I had a nice little comment. That was one of the nice, because that's part of it, is really just like I'm doing here with the stream, is trying to connect with people and then going with this stuff. Let me adjust this a little bit. Getting people involved and help energize, like it's like working together and connecting with people helps get other people to do stuff. So anyway, call them up and say, hey, you know about the PRO Act. Your senators don't support it yet. Let me tell you about it. You tell them about it. Now that I've told you about it, would you like to leave a message or talk to your senator, one of your two senators, or both of your senators' offices? And the dialer had a button you could press to connect. We could actually connect them to the office, stay on the line, conference it in, have them leave the message. I actually went through this with one person, and with some other people, and said we'd send the information to them about the PRO Act, about calling in. They could do it another time. So I did it for a dozen people, or tried to, maybe 4 or 5 successful actual conversations, including the one where actually messages left on the voicemail of the senators. And it doesn't take a whole lot. Even if they get 20 or 30 messages all in favor, that sometimes takes, but that's how this works. And you don't have to be in that state, and you don't have to be, I think, but it doesn't even have to be a local office of the Democratic Socialists of America. You could reach out to one from another city, because I think some of the people. But the point is, they're out there, they're trying to do stuff. And even though I'm not a member, I might slide them some money sometime, because they're out there actually empowering people like me to be able to try to make a difference. And for me to reach out to other people where the people are representing them and be involved there. And that's a value. And that's something that, as I said, state Democratic parties and Democratic clubs don't often do. They tend to play nice and they take votes, and but they're inside the circle. And sometimes you need to apply that outside pressure to kind of move that needle. And so I really appreciated that. And I'm glad I'm on their mailing list, because that's the kind of stuff that I definitely am looking to do to try to help, be involved and get other people involved, and generally in our federal crises right now. And, the reason for this stream, the reason why I do democracy is because we need to get more citizens involved. And when citizens aren't involved is when the government stops. And there are a lot of forces, a lot of things at play that tune us out, that make us more cynical. feed into, it's like a circular loop. They're like a loop. Once you get more cynical, gets less representative, makes us more representative. We have to try to break that cycle and get engaged and be involved. And, with this, I don't know if this will make any difference. I hope Mark Kelly comes around, Kristen Sinema, not holding my breath, but you trying, they've already won. So I've got one person in my stream. If you have, appreciate you staying through the whole thing. As I said, I'm probably gonna cut this up. The last two segments, one by itself, unlisted, or I'll just use different metadata so that it'll be going to, I'm not sure. We'll figure it out. But I appreciate you staying through the whole thing and going with this with me. I don't see anything coming up comments-wise, so I'm going to prepare to close out the stream. I appreciate everybody, maybe some people stopping by. I appreciate everybody who stopped by briefly to listen to me. And thanks for watching Democracy in the News. If you'd like to see more videos, you can go to 10 Minutes for Democracy, my YouTube channel. Consider liking and clicking on the notification bell. And at the end of my videos, I provide some slides at the bottom. Hopefully they'll be coming up on the replay. And thanks for watching.